Welcome to the Impact Multiplier CEO podcast. If you're a chief executive, or if you think like one, and you want to create exponentially greater impact, then this show is for you. My name is Richard Medcalf, founder of X Quadrant. I coach some of the most successful and impressive CEOs and executive teams on the planet and help them achieve extraordinary results. And no matter how successful you've been in the past, there's always a whole new level of impact available to you. So if you're ready to play a bigger game than ever before, I invite you to join us and become an Impact Multiplier CEO.
Hi, Richard.
Hi, Stephanie. It's good to see you again.
Yes, again on a very hot day, actually.
It's really hot, and I think what people don't realize, especially in America, where air conditioning is just pretty much everywhere, is when it's a warm day in Paris, everybody's just dying, right? It's painful. It's painful.
Wishing I was in the office, actually, to be quite honest. But there you go. I'll make what I've got at home.
I was talking to a founder the other day who's back into his office after spending about 3 months in the French countryside, right, during the COVID lockdown. And he said, I said, how was it like to be back? Because I knew he actually quite enjoyed this, countryside living and running his business from remote. And he said, well, actually, it's fine. It's a nice day, and I'm in the air conditioning, right? So there are some advantages in getting back into the office.
Yeah, absolutely. So shall we get on with it then?
Let's continue on the series of impact multipliers, right? Which is what we've been looking at.
Yeah. Okay, so tell me about it. I think we're on release commitment, I think, is what we're talking about today.
Yeah, so if you remember, last time we talked about eliminating noise and really having that strategic focus. And I think this one, releasing commitment, is a real multiplier. As I like to have a Queen lyric for everything. So I thought about, in the immortal words of Freddie, I'm a shooting star leaping through the sky like a tiger defying the laws of gravity, right? Don't stop me now. I mean, often we can feel a bit like that ourselves if we really feel that sense of ownership to a project and a commitment and a drive. But then, if we're honest, we might look around and go, well, everybody else looks a bit tired and not in the game. And the number of times I hear leaders say, my people aren't committed, they don't really own it. I'm trying to get them to take ownership, but they don't own it, all this kind of stuff, right? And wouldn't it be amazing if we can actually release commitment and release energy from the people around us? And yet it almost seems that the harder we push, the less commitment we might get sometimes. So that's really what I would like to talk about today, I think.
So what you mean by that is, you've got this great strategy, great ideas, great ways to move the business forward, have a great meeting, everyone nods along, but then it's just really hard to get people to actually buy in and actually help and deliver that great strategy or whatever it is that we're trying to do.
Yeah, I remember, I remember when I was in Cisco, somebody put up a slide which said, we're going to do results equals strategy times execution, or something like this, and that was his big idea. This guy, and a lot of people will say that it's like we just need like good strategy and then execute the strategy. And I think I'd rather say that results is alignment times leadership in many ways. Like, it doesn't matter what strategy you have if people aren't really aligned around it, if they don't really, not really committed to that. And then leadership, I think, is the art of releasing that commitment. And energy in an organization so that they can execute, right? So I think execution is the result, but you have to mobilize people to do that.
Yeah, maybe another way to think about it is it's about all executing to the same objectives or to the same goals. We can all be executing like crazy, but if everyone's executing in different directions, then the end result is, we don't go anywhere.
Yeah, right. Yeah, some of my clients one of my clients used a phrase which was really good, which was basically like, my organization is like an amoeba. I thought when I kind of became the CEO that I would like have all this control And in fact, I don't feel I have very much control. It's like I'm this dot in the middle of the amoeba, but it's kind of moving around. It seems to have a life of its own.
Yeah.
And actually, there aren't a lot of muscles in this machine. Mixing my metaphors here, but there are enough muscles in this organism to really get it to react how I would imagine.
Yeah, I must say it's my experience with this kind of thing has been, I think, in being part of a team where I've had leaders with great ideas, charismatic, but there was always the struggle with putting into reality sort of the vision that was being communicated. I think me myself, I've had the same problem in terms of sometimes it's in a way, sometimes it's easier to get the nod or the official yes from your direct reports. But then sort of once you all go off and try and make things happen in your own corners, because we're senior leaders, and they are trying to get their own teams to buy in and all the rest of that cascade, that alignment, is not easy. It's like, it's really hard. And it's not about how good your idea is.
No, absolutely. So that's what we're going to get on to. So ownership and commitment, I think, is this key thing. And so I've have this notion of a fourfold commitment that I think it'd be good to explore today. So let me just jump in with the first one. The first one is commitment to you, right? So if you're looking at your organization, the first thing you actually want is there a personal commitment to you as a leader? It's the old adage, if you're a leader, if you turn around and if there's anybody following, right? That's the question. And I think John Maxwell, who's a leadership author, he put it nicely, which said before people buy into your vision, they need to buy into you.
Yeah, I think I would agree with that. I think that's something that we see again and again, for good or worse, but the cult of the personality does live on, and we all are more open-minded and more willing to listen to people that we actually feel an affinity for, or respect for, or whatever it is. So I can see where you're coming from on that. But how do you make that happen?
To make it happen? Well, yeah. So people follow people. So how do we do that? Well, I think obviously, there's a whole range of we could spend days talking about all these angles, right? But I think a couple of helpful ways is to look at this is this balance between task focus and being clear around what is needed and what your expectations are, and relationship focus, to actually creating that understanding that you actually care about the other person as a person and not as a unit of production, not as a resource. So I call it, the simple phrase for this for me is it's challenge, which is around task and deadlines and standards and clarity of what's expected, and support, which is around personal relationship and personal understanding. Because how many leaders really know what's going on in the lives of their family, of their team's families? How many of them even know their, the names of the children of somebody who they work with every day? All these kind of things. And it's not just about knowing that. It's also about understanding, what's holding you back right now. What are your dreams and your ambitions as a person, right? What are you trying to achieve? What would be success for you in this role, rather than just treating everybody as pawns on your chessboard?
Yeah, and I think it's something that needs to be done proactively. In that, I still remember one of my first roles as a manager, and I had a very good line manager who said to me, Stephanie, you're very focused on tasks, you're very focused on results and getting somewhere. And you inevitably view the 5-minute chit chat at the beginning of a meeting as a waste of time and not very efficient. But actually make sure you always have that 5-minute chit chat, because sometimes that's the only way you're going to get to know the people you're working with. And it really stuck when she said this to me, because I'd thought, let's just get on with it and make things happen. And I'd lost that human need from a lot of people, myself included, to feel like, as you say, you're not a pawn, you're not just a cog, that, you know, there's life outside of work, and people are interested. And ever since then, I've always tried to, you know, even if I'm super busy and I've got loads of meetings, try to make sure that 5-minute chit chat happens at the beginning.
And I think it's because, you know, anonymity is a big contributor to employee misery, right, rather than engagement. So when you just feel that you're a replaceable unit of production, it doesn't feel good, right? It doesn't excite you. You're not putting your heart into that. So yeah, leaders create culture, and I think it's helpful to see, you know, look at the people in your team. What's the long-term culture that they're receiving from you? So if it's all about challenge and not so much about support, then it's going to be this kind of dominator culture, right? It's going to be very task focused. It's going to be really about just delivering the things that I need you to deliver. And people comply often in those situations. So you get results, and especially in the short term, but people's heart aren't in it, right? It's not something they feel personally engaged in. They're probably not going to bring their best innovations either. They're also probably a bit scared because it's very, very like my way or the highway often, or, you know, or like if the standards aren't there, then there's no quarter because I don't really care about you as a person. And that comes through. And so you don't get people's hearts. On the other hand, there are leaders who, you know, and this comes out, obviously, in all of this comes out more and more under stress. So on a good day, we can all be the perfect leader, right? The question is, what do we do when the pressure's on, when the customer's calling up and screaming at us, when our boss is putting pressure on us, when we've got other issues going on, when we've got too much on our plate? So this is like, where do we fall back to, right? Because our team probably feel it more than ever. And we probably don't notice it as much as they do. So the opposite of this kind of high challenge dominator style is the very, very high support, but low in challenge leader. And there, I call it the insulator model, because it's all about the comfort zone. It's about nice conversations, not, you know, preserving the relationship, having a nice ambiance, and that's all great. But often the hard conversations then don't happen.
Yeah.
Right. The standards aren't kept. People know they can kind of get away with substandard behavior or substandard deliverables, and in one way, people kind of like it in one way, but on the other hand, they know that the truth isn't being told. They know that they're not really growing. They know that perhaps their skills in the market are starting to be eroded. They're not quite as current. They're not really on top of their game, right? And I think this is a real danger zone as well, because what often happens is when you have that kind of culture, it'll be like, you're great, it's all going well, yeah, and really good job, you know, a few hints here and there, perhaps, oh yeah, you perhaps work on that a bit, and then suddenly you're fired. What? I was thinking of a leader who said that the low point of their career was when they basically did not point out performance issues with somebody, and then they fired them.
Yeah.
And the guy was like, why didn't anybody tell me? And then in fact, he stopped, he paused, you know, why didn't anyone tell me? Why didn't anybody tell me? And it was because this culture of kind of dancing around the topic had been established.
Yeah.
So if you don't bring support, people are going to feel like pawns on the chessboard. If you don't bring enough challenge, people get into this complacent stagnation, which doesn't serve them.
Yeah.
Sometimes leaders don't bring either of those. They're just absent, right? They're not even around. Especially when often what happens is, especially if you're more introverted, I think, when the pressure's on, people can retreat into themselves to try to solve the problem in their own head and figure it out by themselves, and the team are left wondering what's happening. But what happens when you bring both together consistently? It doesn't mean always jamming on the accelerator and the brake, so to speak, but it means really knowing at any one time, yeah, we'll just definitely need more support from me or more challenge from me right now. Does she know that I care about her as an individual and is interested in what she's trying to achieve and what her constraints are in her life and work right now, or what she needs to be learning? Am I supporting her in that? But am I also really pushing her to be the best she can be, right? And I think that, I call it the activation zone. It's there where you create commitment to the leader, because a leader like that, you know, who believes in you and trusts you and pushes you, is actually incredibly rare, right? And it's precious when you get one.
And it creates a two-way street in that, you know, if you are a leader and you trust your people and you show that commitment and you find the right balance of support and challenge, my experience is that they show the same back to you. So when you get to difficult times or when you've got difficult challenges, they're more like, the team is more likely to pull together and sort of, you know, deliver against sort of and commit to overcoming a challenge than when sort of the relationship is a bit more imbalanced.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I find that just having a very simple weekly discipline can be really useful. So I would say, imagine a steering wheel. And so the question every week for everyone on your team is, do I go left or right? Do I add a bit more support? And what would that look like this week? Or do I need to add a bit more challenge? And what does that look like? So sometimes, and of course, those will look different in different ways. Some people, what support means is I really want you to take an interest in me as a person.
Yeah.
And know about me. Other people, support means like really make sure that you're giving me all the resources that I need, and all the, you know, or perhaps the training, like actually spend time with me to help me get over this particular hump that I'm trying to get over. Or do they need more challenge, right? Do they need a new project? Do they need their goals raised? Do they need to be pushed harder on standards, right? Do they need that behavior called out? You know, what's the challenge? And so left or right. And then also think about the accelerator and the brake. You know, it's like, what's the brake? What's holding them back right now? What's the one thing that's really limiting them? And that might be, you know, they pick their nose in a meeting and everyone thinks it's gross, right? Or it might be they write horrendously long emails that nobody ever reads.
Yeah.
Or it might be that they themselves don't challenge their team, or are totally crushing their team and not, you know, and just driving them as, you know, slave driving. And then what's the accelerator? What's the one thing that if they were to do would get them to their next level? Yeah. I think just by that idea, the steering wheel and the brake and the accelerator, you can immediately come up with like a really simple leadership game plan for your team.
Yeah.
And this applies at executive level. People think this doesn't really apply. Oh, my team, they're senior enough. I pay them enough money. They don't need this stuff, right? They should be able to get on with it. But actually, if you want to build that, if you don't want to have an amoeba, if you're just doing things in isolation, you do actually need, even more at the executive level, this really strong sense of commitment.
Yeah.
It goes beyond just like performance objectives that I need to tick off.
Yeah, I think the mechanics might be slightly different with an experienced team, and in fact I know they are, but they're bringing out the commitment. It doesn't happen on its own. You've got to make it happen. Yeah, it's not just going to happen on its own. So that's the commitment to me or you as a leader.
Yeah, and there's more we can say, but let's move on. There's multiple things we could do. We could do this on another episode perhaps. So the next one is commitment to the mission, right? Commitment to the vision, if you like. So what does commitment to the mission look like? I think there's two things that I would speak to there. One of which is, well, the first one is having a heroic vision.
Yeah.
So a heroic vision for me is, it's another way of looking at it, another language for it would be, how are we going to add value to our stakeholders? I mean, that sounds a really dry way of putting it, but it's like, actually, like, how can we be in service? Who are we in service to?
Yeah, I think, the way it's sometimes been described to me is, you know, what you want is a vision where anyone in your organization is proud to talk about it at a dinner party or a drinks party when someone says, who do you work for? They do, and that you have a vision which is well understood and something that someone can be proud of and happy to talk about.
Exactly. And what's that going to be? It's going to be because you're actually making somebody's life better somewhere.
Yeah.
Right? So
ways, but yes.
I mean, in some way down the road, you know, when you're going to go through all the layers, it's actually so that somebody has a better life somewhere. And so it's interesting to think about, you know, who is affected by what we do, right? What's the end outcome? How does that actually do that? And so I think that idea of a heroic vision, of actually painting something which people, as you said, really want to get behind. My brother-in-law works at an energy company, and it actually works in renewable energy. So yeah, fantastic, really, right, for the planet and everything else. And yet, when they had a new CEO, the CEO started off by just going, our mission is to drive shareholder value, and it was like, nobody gets out of bed for shareholder value apart from perhaps the shareholder, right? But I mean, people don't put their back into just a revenue number, right? Unless they're really, really, really highly leveraged and incentivized to do that. And even then, once you get to a certain level, you don't do it. So how can so what a shame to miss out this opportunity. You've actually got this thing where you're making the planet better. You're actually moving away from fossil fuels, all these things you could be celebrating in your mission, and actually you chose to make it all about shareholder value.
But isn't there the other problem which you have to pay attention to, is by trying to build a heroic vision, you can make the vision so abstract and so unanchored into the reality of what the company or the organization actually does, that it just feels like words. It doesn't feel real. It just feels like a banner to stick over things. So it's got to be anchored in something.
Yeah. So everything can be spun, right? Everything can be spun, and I think you have to have a vision which is something which you genuinely are striving for, and that might actually be something which is kind of unattainable because it is so big.
Yeah.
But that gets into other aspects. Once you have that, other parts of all this impact multiplication come into play. Namely, how do we bring that down to something that we can actually progress towards in the next quarter or year or 3 years? And but once you've got the North Star, it helps you think, oh yeah, well, what is that next? What's the best thing we can do the next year to advance that agenda? And it also allows us to go back and go, have we been getting off course? Have we been taken off track by other distractions? Yeah. And can we refocus? And you can do this on a personal level as well as on a team or company level. So I always ask, as an individual leader, what's your own heroic vision for your life? What's the good that you want to do? What's the impact you want to make? What's your 25-year vision for the impact that you'd like to create? Because again, that could be something which sounds so crazily impossible, we have no idea how to get there. It's 25 years, but that's only 1% a quarter if it's 25-year vision. So suddenly, well, what's the 1% that I could, what's the 1% step I could take this quarter? Or, what's the 4% I could do this year? That starts to become something which doesn't sound so difficult. It sounds manageable. And yet, that you can wind your way towards that bigger vision. So I think commitment to the mission. So having this heroic vision that is that people can see themselves in and see why it's important, and that can be for the company, for the team. Again, a client was running a team in a company, and he was saying, yeah, well, the mission's all about driving EBITDA. Again, it was, well, that is what you end up delivering financially to the company. But that's not going to, and that'll get some of your team excited, just the ones who like to tick the numbers off and go, yeah, I hit that number, did it, fine. But there's also these other people in your team, and that's not going to excite them. So what is that mission that you can offer to them, even if your company hasn't got some huge mission? How can you help them have that vision? And then very related to this is the future self. Because when we talk about vision, heroic vision, it's the idea of we can see ourselves into that future picture. And the future self is, who are you going to be becoming? Who do we want to be as we go on that mission? So what's the opportunity for us to actually grow and be better, I suppose, at the end of that process? So I think when you can actually explain, not just, so I'll give you an example. When I work with executive teams as a team, you might figure out what the vision is for the company. Perhaps they got the vision for the company or whatever else. But I then say, well, what's actually the vision for you as a team? Yeah, and what's your next level as a leader, right? How do you want to actually grow over the next season? And what's that going to say about you? What's the impact that's going to make? And so when people can actually see their own growth as part of this story, that also adds a turbo boost to it. It's not necessary, but I think it's really powerful.
Yeah, it's a way of, in a way, it's another way of anchoring the vision into what's in it for me.
Kind of, yeah.
We're all at heart selfish, even though we try not to be. And there's very much a what's in it. To release commitment, people have to understand, what's in it for me in terms of my value system, in terms of my, whether it's financial or, there's got to be, for people to commit to something, even when, especially at senior level, where the execution is not clear, because often when you're at senior level, there's not a well-laid roadmap, you've got to define it.
Yeah.
So for people to commit to something which is unclear, then, it needs to be meaningful and it needs to be anchored into something that brings meaning to the person in each member of the team. Yeah,
exactly. And so you're incarnating it. It's not just this big vision, but it's also, how am I going to have that heroic role in this journey? It's not just the vision, but what's my bit, right? How do I need to step up and be a hero in this story and not a villain or a bit character? So that's the second part, commitment to the mission.
This is just a quick interlude before we get back to today's main conversation. To celebrate the launch of the podcast, we're giving away, for the first time ever, a coaching package valued at over $3,000. You can use it yourself, or you can give it to a friend or colleague who wants to multiply their impact. To enter, all you have to do is leave a review of the podcast on iTunes or in your preferred podcast app, and send a screenshot to podcast@xquadrant.com. And do that before 15th of September 2020. If you do miss that deadline, then leave a review before the 15th of October and there'll be a chance to win a smaller coaching package. For all the details, head to xquadrant.com/podcasts. Reviews are the lifeblood of any podcast, and so whether or not you're within the eligibility time, it would still be fantastic if you would leave us a review if you like the podcast or if you see the potential in the future as we continue to refine it, develop it and add to it. Many thanks, and let's get back to that conversation.
The next one, the third part, is commitment to the team.
Okay, yes, that's a natural progression, isn't it? There's no good being committed to vision if the team's not working together. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, exactly. Like, do I look around the room and go, these are the people I want to go on this trip with, right? Now, I suppose there is a slight caveat to put on this. I remember actually speaking with a pastor of a church, and very big on community. But he said to me, Richard, community. Everyone thinks community is amazing, and everyone longs for community. And I've devoted my life to building community, so I do believe in it. But what you have to realize is that community is doing things that you don't want to do with people that you don't want to do it with.
Yeah. That sounds like all committees I've ever been on. Not all of them, but most of them. That's because you believe in the purpose, and it's worth trying to make it happen.
Yeah, exactly. And so, you have to kind of put down a bit of that, your own agenda, if you're going to make this thing work. And so there is. So I don't want to over glorify this idea of the team who's everybody's totally, absolutely, the perfect team. But you do need a commitment to do the journey together.
Yeah, I think probably my closest equivalent of this commitment to team is probably sort of my boat race experience, which was, the vision, and we all knew what we were trying to do. We all knew we were trying to win the boat race. It was a long, tough journey, and the commitment to the team was really actually we all knew what was required of each of us, and when the chips were down and when things went wrong, we knew we could rely on everyone in the team to still do what was required.
Right.
And that level of trust got us through some really, our coach resigned sort of 4 weeks before the boat race. You know, we had injuries everywhere. It was pretty grim. But that commitment to team, like we were all committed to the vision. We were all committed to each doing our part to make that happen.
Yeah.
You know, that got us through all the mess that was around there.
Yeah, that's amazing. I forgot that you were a sporting legend, actually.
Yeah, all my team building stuff all comes from rowing, I'm afraid.
Yeah, so I think that question about how do you build that in a team, and that question of trust. I mean, it's one of those management 101s. It's almost like, yeah, we know trust. But even today, I was speaking with a CEO who is doing a major transformation program around cloud computing, and we're talking about why things weren't happening faster and where the friction was. And we got down to the root cause, and it was like, actually, I'm not sure my team really trusts each other. I think there's a lot of baggage from previous years, from across different regions and all the rest of it, and it's like, we're talking all this big stuff about all the strategy and all the clever things to do, but actually there's a very human issue at the root of this. And the other thing I see is this hub and spoke kind of structure, especially in executive teams, which can be that, you have like the CEO and then in the center, and then you have all the individual leaders as a spoke on that wheel.
And the bottleneck.
And the CEO is like, I get on with everybody, but there's actually a very limited relationship between the team. So it's not really a team, right? Often that's the big problem, is the executive teams are not teams. I mean, one of the things I say is I help turn teams of high performers into high performing teams, because often that's exactly what happens. You don't have a team spirit at the top level in companies. It's just a bunch of people who know how to run their function and are very good at marketing or technology or HR or, sales, but they do not have a team dynamic and they're not committed to each other.
And I wouldn't confuse liking each other with being capable of being a good team. No. Sometimes I see this confusion. And I think there's the trust element, which is super, like respect. Trust comes from respect, comes from understanding. Maybe you have differences, but if you trust and respect each other and know that everyone's going to do what needs to be done, and you don't constantly have to go up to the CEO or up to the president and then have him or her kind of tell everyone what to do. If you can trust each other to interact directly with each other, it's gold.
Exactly.
It's so impactful. It makes a huge difference.
Yeah, this is huge, right? So this is what I'm saying. These are impact multipliers, because if you don't have this, it just slows everything. I mean, if you've got a team who are super committed to each other, then the energy that releases is huge, right? But if you don't have that, then you're pushing all the time, right? You're trying to make things happen. You're trying to drive things. I mean, I always, my ears prick up whenever anyone uses the word drive, because if I'm trying to drive results, that takes a lot of energy for not necessarily a lot of result. If you can release commitment, it sounds like you like the touch paper and step back, right? That's what you look.
Yeah, and what my boss at SunGuard used to say to me is, it's definitely what you should work on is just making yourself unnecessary to the functioning of the team. So your role is to set the vision, put the right things in place, find the right people, get them working together. But that if you went away and disappeared for 2 weeks, that they'd be able to function and keep committed and moving on with whatever it is that the objective is.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, somebody's probably already trademarked it, but I think if it hasn't already been trademarked, I should trademark the word strategic laziness, because that's the best thing, right?
Like the sound
though. Yeah. So moving to the teams, that's the third one. And so I think a really practical, first question for anyone is, what can I do to build that commitment? How do am I actually giving attention to the trust issues and the dynamics of the team? Or am I just focused on task and getting the EBITDA number done for the quarter and everything else? There's a lot we could say on that. Perhaps we do something, we dive deeper, but I think just realizing that is a really big driver of energy and ownership. And then the last one is commitment to the task, right? I mean, this perhaps where you start is committed to the task, right? Well, what are we actually needing to get done right now? I think that's the big one as well.
Yeah, well, sometimes the task is a lot less sexy than the vision. And, you know, some tasks are really dull and boring, but, you know, if you, the only way you're going to get people to do the dull, boring, tedious stuff is if you know how it relates to the vision, and if people are committed to the vision.
Yeah, so you got the stack, right? You've got the stack. It's, you know, I'm committed to you as a leader, so I want to help. You know, I want to help you. I'm committed to the bigger picture here, the mission, right? You know, I know the team have got my back, and I want to make sure that we win together. And then the task, and I think the task is a couple of areas of it. So one of which is about energy. So as a leader, it's kind of our role is to help people get into their zone of genius, get into the work that energizes them. Not for all the time, because there's growth of doing things which are not quite in your genius zone, but we know, we all have certain activities we love doing, we find fascinating, we can invest in, we can go more and more, and that energizes us. And if we can actually help people spend more of their time in that zone which energizes them, then that releases energy and commitment and desire to do more and to go deeper.
Yeah, and I think getting that balance, you know, it's the trap you can fall into is assigning tasks based on what people have done before, what they're already good at.
Yeah.
And when you get to a senior team, senior teams, most people have done lots of things that are very good at, but what they're really into, and the reason they're still working, and the reason they're ambitious people, is they want to be challenged. And it can be very frustrating for ambitious, bright, committed individuals to constantly be given the same task, which
right. But I think
energizing and test time is pretty boring.
I think what you're distinguishing here is this kind of zone of excellence where you're just good at it. And then I think that there is this other place, this energy zone, which is the rabbit hole never ends. You keep, that you want to, the new projects will flow into that. But you know that when you're in that place, whether it's strategizing and coming up with new approaches, or whether it's, mobilizing people, or whether it's, going deep into, or envisioning the future and thinking through how it's going to be ready. Whatever it is that really lights you up. It might just be, being really organized at managing a whole lot of complexity and getting all the resources and people and systems to all align. Whatever it is, we can always go deeper. If it really energizes us, we can always get more mastery, and we never want to stop on that journey. And I think that's what you want to find. What are those things? And that's why we need to, as leaders, we need a language to help us do that, right? Like, how well do we know our people? Do we really know where their genius is? Or are we just saying, well, there's a job over here that needs doing, please do this? It'd be like...
That takes us full circle to the very first point, sir, that you sort of talked about, which was the commitment to you as a leader, the sort of support challenge, getting to know your people. All four of these sort of pillars or elements or puzzle pieces, they all link together. You can't just work on one and think that's going to release commitment.
So it's prisms on whatever. It's like looking at the gem from different angles, I suppose. I suppose the way I like to see this idea of the energy and the genius zone is it's a bit like, again, I'll use Queen as an example because it just popped in my mind. Freddie Mercury walks into a bar. It sounds like a joke, doesn't it? But it's not going to be a joke. And says, like into a nightclub or something, right? And there's perhaps a stage and everything in this nightclub. And the guy goes, we need like somebody to serve the drinks, Here, I'll give you a job to serve the drinks. And so you take Freddie Mercury and you stick him serving drinks.
Yeah.
Right. You've just totally missed, like the genius zone of sticking him on the stage with a microphone. Yeah. Somebody else, another friend of mine says, was it Frank Sinatra didn't move pianos? It was like...
Or is it like a fish? You can't teach a fish to ride a bicycle, or I'm not sure if that's the same analogy. People have a set of skills, competencies, strengths, weaknesses, and without understanding that, then you can't map people to the right kinds of components of your vision, whether you call it tasks or projects or whatever it is. You need to know that.
Exactly. So the question is, do you have a system as a leader for that? Do you have a language for that? There's various tools around, and I've used kind of a hybrid approach with some different ones. Again, we can talk more about that, but I think, as a leader, do you have that system to allow you to help people get into their genius zone? And then related to that is ownership. How do you create ownership? And I hear this in my coaching all the time. How do I get people to buy in, to own? And I said, but the way we talk about ownership so often, it's like, imagine that you, I don't know, you wake up and there's a baby just lying in your doorway. Well, you might have to deal with it, right? But you don't feel you own that, it doesn't feel necessarily you own that problem in the same way that you do own the problem when it's actually your baby that you've made, and you're going to get up in the middle of the night to deal with it, right? So I say people own what they help make, right? And so often ownership in business is like forcing my idea down into my organization, like take ownership, own this. Nobody wants to have something thrust at them, telling them to own it. So the question becomes, how do you co-create? How do you help people feel that they have actually shaped this task and that they have actually, the task is theirs as much as it is yours?
Yeah, that's a tricky balance, because there's a time as a leader where you have to push forward a certain vision and a certain way of making things happen. And the danger for especially strong sort of dominant leaders like myself maybe is sort of taking the time to open up the vision or open up the sort of the plan to other people, sort of adjusting it and adding their own flavor, and in that way co-creating. And it feels like it might slow things down, but actually longer term, by making time for that, it can just accelerate the execution.
Exactly. It's a multiplier, because you get it done and then it keeps working. It keeps working for you. So I agree. This is not about, I talk about push and pull behaviors, right? So push is like telling you very clearly, explaining what I need, what I want, all that. And a lot of leaders, as you say, are very good at that, very good at pushing. Pulling is establishing common ground, listening in, trying to find out what your perspectives are, how you change things, drawing out from you what you see is important in this. And I say, if you just if you push, you'll be very clear, which is great, but you won't create any commitment. If you only pull, then you'll create great ownership, but about something which is not at all aligned with anything else. They'll totally own what they've come up with, but it's not been shaped by any external reality. And so I think it's this art of using both push and pull techniques, so that you are very clear about perhaps the intent, or what the outcome needs to look like, or at least the rough outline of this is the kind of the target zone that we're aiming for. But then switch over and go into pull mode and say, so how would you adjust this picture? What do you think the obstacles are? How are we going to need to address this? What are going to be the main areas that we need to attack on this? How would we structure this? What do we need to deal with first? And you allow them to be a co-creator in that process. So you do definitely define the boundary of play, or whatever you want to describe it, the target zone, but actually you help co-create something with them.
Wow, so much to think about.
So there's a lot, and again, I think the point of these early episodes is really just to kind of put these things out there. Knowing that each of these, when we get to episode 549, perhaps we'd have done, would have exhausted them all. But I think even just thinking, commitment to you as a leader, commitment to the mission, commitment to the team, and commitment to the task. And when you're thinking, well, so-and-so in my organization, they don't seem committed. They're not taking ownership. Just take a time to just think about those 4 angles and go, where's the weak point here, right? If I can work on one thing, what's going to be the one to work on?
Yeah, I like this sort of systematic approach rather than relying on sort of gut or experience, which can be a bit woolly. Like just having those systematic checklists, those 4, okay, I'm not seeing commitment. Is the problem, my leadership, the vision, the commitment to team, or the commitment to task? It's a real helpful, you can just go through that and it helps pinpoint the action that needs to happen.
Yeah, exactly. So that's why, as I say, it's a huge subject. And, books have been written about all these different things. But I think what we need more than now in this day and age are these kind of like these simple mental models that allow us in the moment, or when we're faced with something like, okay, commitment, okay, yeah, 4-fold commitment, let me think about that. It just helps us process more efficiently than kind of almost going to buy a book about something and reading, spending a day reading the book, or to say just kind of jumping to the usual technique that we use. They need more incentives. Let's bring more incentives on. They're not committed enough, or they're obviously the wrong person for this job. Need to sack them and find somebody else, or whatever our instinctive reaction is. Or when we're not feeling there's commitment, actually just taking a step back and going, okay, what could how do we break that down into its constituent parts?
Fabulous! Wow, I enjoyed that one. So does this mean we're now ready to move on to the next topic?
Yeah, I think so. So next time we will talk about multiplier number 3, which I kind of call accelerate learning. And we'll talk about, that's really about how do we address mindset issues, attitude issues across an organization. Why doesn't leadership development normally work, and what to do instead. And obviously accelerating learning, we just know in our day and age, world is moving so fast. Yeah. We do have to stay on top of things. That's going to be the topic for next time.
Fabulous. Looking forward to it. And if anyone's interested in learning more, either subscribe to our podcast or head to the YouTube channel or the website xquadrant.com for the show notes. And any final thoughts, Richard, just to close us off?
I think my final thoughts would be that releasing commitment is a game changer. Releasing that additional energy over and above the bare minimum from people separates good businesses from great businesses. And I think this idea of push versus pull strategies is really a key one. So I would encourage you, think about the interaction you've got coming ahead. The next conversation that's going to be a high stakes conversation, and just think ahead of time. How far do I want to push? What do I need to really be clear about? And actually, where can I pull? Where can I get curious? Where can I invite them in to shape this? How much liberty can I actually give them to take the driving seat and me to step back? And I think just by looking at that push and pull can really create some shifts in just a few conversations around commitment.
Thank you, Richard.
Thanks, Stephanie. See you next time.
See you next time.
I hope you enjoyed this conversation. Now let's talk about you. When you're in a position of top leadership, when you're in the biggest role of your career, who supports you at a deep level as you lead others? Who helps you multiply your impact and get to the next level? Well, this is what we do. If you'd like to know more about our community of extraordinary leaders, visit us at xquadrant.com.